Hey, Roger Whitney here from the Retirement Answer Man podcast. I love books. In fact, I have books coming out of my ears. But what I really love are amazing books. And Dr. Daniel Crosby, a good friend of mine, has a new book out today, The Soul of Wealth. To follow is a conversation that Dan and I had about the book to help you on your journey to rock retirement. All right, we're here with Dr. Daniel Crosby, Chief Behavior Officer of Orion Advisor Services, author of The Laws of Wealth, The Behavioral Investor. I have a hard time with my words. And his new book, The Soul of Wealth. Dan, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, when I see a book marked up like that, I'm doing fantastic. No higher compliment. Great to be here.
Yeah, and that I just began, so you'll see. This will probably be 1/4 of what actually happens.
Let them
This is
know.
how I steal content, Daniel.
No, look. Everything's a remix, Roger. I get it.
Everything's a remix. I'm going to tell you, I remember when we had lunch near your house, you brought me a gift bag of your books. All of them. This is by far, not that I didn't like the other ones, this is by far my favorite one.
It's by far the best. I'm proud of the other ones. This one's going to reach more people, do more good, and it's better than the other ones. I mean, like most things in life, you get better with time and practice, hopefully. And I'm glad to hear you say it because I'm totally with you.
I have one of my axes, and I have many axes, is in financial planning, specifically retirement planning. It can become about the numbers more than about the life. And I was thinking about this because we just ended the third quarter, and I updated my net worth statement, which I do every quarter. There's something about updating your financials that gives you a scoreboard. Right. And we are driven by that. We started with that in school, right? Get an A, B, or C, and then get into a certain college and then get promotions. Life is gamified from a scoreboard perspective, and it's easy to make the scoreboard the thing rather than the vehicle. And I think that's what this book hits to. You use a phrase called soulful wealth. Can you define that for me?
Yeah, loosely, because it's going to look a little different for every person. But when you talk about the soul of something, you're really talking about the essence of it, right? Like the bottommost turtle, the most important thing, the essence of the thing. And as you suggested quite beautifully just a minute ago, we've taken a very one-dimensional view of wealth. I mean, you could make a case for wealth encompassing things such as, of course, your level of financial, your level of financial preparedness, but it could also include things like your relationships, your health, having meaningful work to do, working for something bigger than yourself. I mean, there are many facets and many dimensions to wealth that I cover in the book. Because I think it's been so roundly ignored because they're messier. They're harder to measure than your net worth statement, but they're also a lot more enduring and a lot more gratifying and frankly a lot more important than your net worth statement.
When you have highly successful people that are nearing retirement, which is generally the people that listen to this show, they have, a lot of them are engineers or project managers. It's comforting and safe to quantify things. And I have a sticker here of retirement is not a spreadsheet, just to help remind people that this is a means to an end. It's not the end. For that mindset, for some people, it's difficult to get over that and get into what are uncomfortable conversations rather than just stay in their spreadsheet. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that we're not trying to take away your spreadsheets, right? I think the dollars and cents blocking and tackling piece of retirement preparedness is very important. And it facilitates a lot of these other things. Like it is sort of a vehicle for a lot of these other things to happen. So I think that's an important distinction. Like nobody's trying to take away, you hitting your number. But it's just like once you have hit that number, what's a way that you can conceptualize of that wealth and spin that wealth that is a little more fulfilling holistically? And that's what I'm trying to broaden and deepen the conversation, not to take away, the good that people are already doing. I've tried, I think there are a couple of different ways that you can measure it too, right? Like in the book, I introduce some of the work around positive psychology and I give a model, right? Like this is a 5-factor model for human flourishing. And I cited some of them earlier when I
Martin
was talking.
Seligman,
But
yeah,
like,
great work.
yeah, it's like here's the 5 things that make life rich. Make a spreadsheet about that. I set goals in all of those areas every year, and I put a big poster board on the back of my door here, and I grid it out, and I work towards that, and I try and concretize those relational goals. And it's always a little bit of a copy, right? Because there's no blood test for do my kids love me, but or am I being a good parent? But I think that that's not a bad way. Take the good that you're already doing and apply it to greater richness and greater depth.
That Prima model, we may need to incorporate that into our process. We start with establishing your top 10 values right before the financial goal conversation, with the idea that if the top 10 values are the beginning of the thread, you should be able to follow a thread from a financial standpoint all the way down to every individual investment and back up.
Yeah.
Right? Your values are established, your goals are how you express your values, and so forth. But the Prima structure, let's go over what that is real quickly, so people understand that framework.
Sure. So the Perma model is Martin Seligman. Yeah, Perma is Martin Seligman's. He's the father of positive psychology. Just a quick little psychology history lesson. For many years, psychology was just about all the ways your parents screwed you up, right? And that was sort of all we talked about was why you were anxious, why you were sad, why you were depressed. And Seligman comes along and says, look, there's another side to this coin. Let's talk about what makes people thrive. Like let's talk about what makes people great leaders or great partners or great parents. And he found that there were really these 5 elements to human flourishing, and they spell out PERMA. So the P is for positive experiences. This is fun, right? This is leisure. This is going to the beach with your family. This is eating an ice cream cone. This is watching a movie. And money checks those boxes very nicely. Like the P in PERMA is a lot of what the folks who are sort of over-indexed on just like getting the number right are preparing for. And it's also kind of sexy and easy to imagine, right? Like I want a beach house, I want a lake house, I want a mountain house, I want a Porsche. Like all of that is P. It's positive experiences, it's fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's only the first dimension. So the second dimension is E. This is for engagement, which is deep, meaningful work, right? And we'll talk in a minute about why retirement can kind of throw a lot of people into crisis. So we need deep work to be happy. And I think a lot of times that gets overlooked. And people who retire, I mean, there's a good reason why death rates skyrocket hot on the heels of retirement, because people have lost their North Star in a lot of senses. They've lost this deep work. The R is relationships. This is, if you just had to maximize for one thing, this would be the one you'd choose. The science is pretty unequivocal here that this is where we get the most benefit, the most uplift is through love, by loving others, by being loved, by giving and receiving love is the foundation of a happy life. The M is for meaning. We need to work for something bigger than ourselves. It could be religion, spirituality, philanthropy, charity, yoga, like whatever that is, you need to be working for something that's bigger than just your own success. And then the A is for advancement, which is we are a growth-oriented species. We want to be better tomorrow than we are today. And so we need goals. We need to be pulling towards something. We need to be growing or we're dying. And so when you think about this in the context of retirement, we put so much emphasis on the P a lot of times and just preparing financially for the positive emotion stuff, which is great. But our work, that deep, meaningful work, if we're not careful, that goes away or is diminished. We have a lot of great relationships at work often, meaning we're working for something bigger than ourselves. We're part of a team or a corporate mission. And then achievement. Work does a very nice job of saying, you did or you didn't do well, here's a promotion, here's a gold star, here's a raise, here's a spot bonus. That stuff is not baked into civilian life in the same way that it is into work life. So there's a lot that needs to be prepared for from a retirement perspective if we're going to continue to flourish in a post-work environment.
Let's hit on that for a second. In that, when you hear those things, meaning, deep work, in my experience, when you start talking about those, it's very easy to make them bigger than they need to be. Right? Not everybody has to change the world. When we think of what my purpose is, we can make it so big. It's like, no, I just want to go love my grandbaby. So how do you navigate? So I want to confirm that it doesn't have to be intimidating. It can be literally, I want to be nice to people when I go to the grocery store in terms of interaction. It doesn't have to be something big.
That is 100% right. So, I'm on a group chat with a bunch of three of my college buddies, and it's hilarious. And it's one of the best parts of my life is just getting to joke around and be goofy with these three guys I love every day. And one of them, but it has moments of levity and it has moments of like profundity. And the other day, my friend sent this thing, and it was like this crypt had been discovered of this king that was once one of the richest people on the earth, and like no one had ever heard of this guy, and they had just discovered his tomb for the first time, right? And so it led to this conversation of like, this guy was the guy. This guy was the guy for so long and to so many people, and now nobody knows his name. Right? I mean, there's 8 billion people living in the world right now. We'll be reading of about 5 of them in the history books, 100, 200 years from now. And it's probably not you or I. And so the thing really becomes meaning for most people is going to be something like really profoundly impact the lives of the handful of people in your immediate orbit, and be nice to people at the grocery store. I think if everyone did that, Roger, I mean, I know you and I are on the same page here. Like if everyone just tried to be the best person they could be for the 5 people that they're closest to, the world would be, flying cars and abundance for everyone. I mean, it would be incredible. So yeah, these words can feel lofty, and we shouldn't let that get in the way of setting goals and trying to do something there. And the engagement piece too, like I could imagine someone, I'm looking at my guitars over here that are getting a little dusty, and I could imagine someone in retirement having, learning to play an instrument as their engagement, or, woodworking, or getting in shape, or 100 things. You just need to be working on something. It doesn't have to be PowerPoints for the man, I mean, it could be a lot of things.
I just finished Wendell Berry's, I think it's his most recent book, where he explores racism in America. And one thread that I pulled out of there that resonated with me that I think applies to this is it's easy to think of, well, racism, which is a very, hot topic and thing, or meaning and purpose. We think of it as this large cloud that you can't really pin down. And one of the things that he talked about is how you need to get down. And Martin Feynman would say that, or Dr. Feynman would say this as well. You have to get very specific in, like, I want to have purpose in my life. Well, what do you do with that? But if you can get very specific on what that means, I want to take my grandchild to lunch once a week. The more specific you get, the more actionable it is. And you feel like you have more agency to actually do something.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think we can get into the clouds.
You are one of the few people on earth that knows this, but I'm undertaking a very serious study of meaning and purpose. I've been a Viktor Frankl devotee for most of my adult life, and I'm undertaking a really sort of detailed study of meaning and purpose in life. And what I have found is what I call the 3 Bs, at the risk of introducing too many models, right? People who have purpose in their lives have answered 3 questions, right? The first is believing, like, what do I believe about the world? People with purpose in their lives have some sort of intellectual, philosophical, moral, religious, spiritual scaffolding in their lives. They have a set of core assumptions and beliefs about the world. It could be Catholicism or Buddhism. It could be Stoicism or existentialism. Like, it could be a million things, but you need sort of some roadmap for making sense of the good and bad parts of life. That's very consistent. And people who are religious, right? People who are religious are consistently happier than people who aren't. And it's not like, again, this isn't a commentary on you should go be religious. It's because they have a map, right? It's because they have some sort of map. So you do need that. So the second B is belonging. You need a tribe, right? You need a tribe of people that are your people. It could be your family. It could be your bicycle club. It could be 1,000 things, but you need a crew. Like, you need people. And then the last thing is becoming. You need a vision of the kind of person you want to be. You need growth goals. You need progress. So if you want purpose in your life, right, what do you believe about the world? Like, who is going to walk with you on this journey, and where are you going? And those questions, they're still big questions, but I think of conceptualizing it that way, you go, I can figure that out. Like, I can figure out, what do I believe about life? Who do I want to walk with on that journey, and where are we going? And I think that's sort of the formula. It's not as grand as I think we make it out to be sometimes.
I was on stage Sunday introducing a speaker. We had our conference for our club, and we had about 280 people that came to Grapevine, Texas for 3 days. And I started saying what a mess I am. I had made a personal error where I felt really bad. So I'm like, I'm a mess. I'm greedy. I'm mean at times. I'm forgetful. And then I looked at the people in the crowd and I said, well, so are you. But we're a glorious mess in that we're trying to be better. We're working on a mastery journey in different areas, and that makes it a glorious mess. And having the tribe of everybody working on their own mastery journey is really fulfilling and empowering. And that's a little bit of what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, the scariest person in the world is the one that doesn't know they're a mess, right? I think the people who have embraced their messiness are the ones you want to surround yourself with, and the people who feel like they're above the messiness, you should probably run from, because that's a very scary way to live.
Well, and part of that takes risk, right? And I made notes as I was preparing for this. Is like in page 68, you had said it takes calculated risks and ambition to create the future you want to live. And then, but what I want, go ahead. You can,
No, that's beautifully written. Who wrote that? That's gorgeous.
you
Just
did,
kidding.
you silly boy.
No. Yes, I agree.
I've had well over 1,000 conversations individually with people at or in retirement. And I had office hours in the club for years, and they would come with, should I do Roth conversions? Should I think about taxes? Or I want to do this vacation. They were presenting with some issue that they wanted to talk about. And my observation, Dan, in those conversations, which relates to this, is 99% of the time, the issue wasn't the issue. What I identified as a thread through those 1,000+ conversations is a crisis of confidence. They already knew what they wanted to do, but they somehow needed permission or affirmation that they could actually do the thing that they already desire. What is it, especially around retirement, that creates this crisis of confidence with people that have the means?
Yeah, so it's a great point, and one of the things that I see as I've writing this book and studying meaning the way that I have is I set out to write a book around like how can we help people discover their meaning, right? Their North Star in their lives. And that's not the book that we need, right? Because most people have a pretty good idea of what that looks like. The book that we need is how do you have the courage to go after it, right? Just like you're saying. So in terms of why are we this way, I mean, one reason, just to get a little dorky, psychologist-y, well, what we're evolutionarily wired to be this way. I mean, we are wired to avoid risk, and we have this asymmetry in the way that we even think about risk and reward, where, you know, our fear of risk is 2.5 times as bad as our desire for that anticipated reward. So it keeps us kind of it keeps us kind of stuck. And from an evolutionary perspective, you only get one bad day, right? Like you only get if you take a big risk and it doesn't work out, then you're done, and you don't get to pass on your genes. And so we're in a very real sense wired to play it safe. But then, as I talk about in the book, we arrive at the end of life and we look back over our lives and it looks very vanilla. And then we get frustrated with ourselves for not having taken adequate risks. So, you know, I think that, you know, at a primal sort of fundamental level, it's how we're wired. The second thing is there's a real crab in the bucket mentality. I mean, there's a real mentality of everyone is sort of head down. Well, most of the world is sort of head down, squeaking by, doing the best they can, living a life of quiet desperation. And so if you want to go do something big and bold and grand and different, that threatens their complacency. Because if they see that, they go, oh gosh, you know, if she can do it, that means that I can do it. And my failure to do it makes me culpable, because we want to blame everything, right? We want to blame the economy and, you know, the budget and the kids and the spouse and everything but our own timidity and our own lack of courage. And so you're never gonna get chided for doing the safe thing. Like if you work yourself into an early grave at a lame job that you hate that gives you benefits and you know, an okay salary, no one will give you a hard time about that. But if you swing for the fences, probably lots of people in your life will. And we're social creatures, and so that's another thing. I think we get penalized for it.
Because we want to fit in.
Yeah.
And so if we stick our head up, we don't.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how do we get over that? Because I'm assuming it's somewhat of the mental work, but also surrounding yourself with people that are striving to stretch themselves. I'm guessing that's part of the solution, but what else might be?
Yeah, I think first you have to have the eyes to see it. Because I think for most people, the self-deception runs so deep that they would not tell themselves that, hey, I'm living a low agency, low meaning life, they would just say, I'm being practical, I'm being sensible. And so I think the first thing you have to do is learn to call yourself on your own BS and know when you are placating yourself or lying to yourself or deceiving yourself. And then when I think that self-deception becomes more obvious to you, it becomes harder to be complacent. But the first thing you have to do is to realize that you're fooling yourself. And as Richard Feynman said, you're the easiest person to fool.
The first principle.
Yeah. So yeah, after that, I think you can move to more black belt stuff, like surrounding yourself with the right people. I write in the book about how deeply predictive that is of success. From everything from weight loss to financial success to promotions is, surrounding yourself with the right people is a very, very big deal. But I think the first thing you got to do is achieve escape velocity from your own cloud of nonsense.
Yeah. One little buy-in that we use in the club and with clients is to get themselves comfortable enough to spend money on first class. Right? Which, assuming it's safe financially and everything else, it's just so against their financial comfort level that it's just to get yourself to do it, especially on an overseas trip. And once they do it once,
there's no going back.
There's no going back.
There's no going back ever.
I need to make a first class sticker. The other thing that I wanted to ask you, and this is definitely true in retirement, that's not quite, it needs to be true more in accumulation, is to have a purpose for your money. I have encountered, and again, I'm talking very first world problems here, right? There is a subset of individuals that have oversaved, or between hard work and blessing and all sorts of reasons, have way more than they're ever going to need for whatever they can imagine.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there at age 60. And they're happy. They're content. They've hit, a lot of those categories that you talked about, that Seligman talks about. But then you're also left with opportunity cost of, it ends up being a lack of imagination of what could you do in life when you for whatever reason have way more than you're ever going to need, so you just don't do anything. How do you start to imagine purposes for that excess resource that you've received?
Yeah, so this is one thing that I talk about a lot, and something that I bemoan in my own circles in the financial technology world. It's potentially a high paid world. Like I have friends in this space who are centimillionaires. And I think a lot of times, they'll sell a company, they'll make more money than they can ever spend, and you go, what's next for you? And they go, well, I'm going to go start another business. Now, if that is and for some of these folks, that is truly their heart's desire. It is truly the thing.
They're creators is more of what it's about.
They are creators. So that this doesn't apply. If that's you, God bless, go do it. Go start 10 companies, because they're helping a lot of people. They're doing good in the world. But there's another subset of people who should go be a soccer coach or a pastry chef or a flight attendant or 100 different things. And there is this lack of creativity. So the first thing is, I think you got to work with someone. I think you got to work with a professional. It is really hard to escape the noise in your own head. Go get a shrink, go get a career coach, go get someone to help you sort of get out of your own head, because you have to play a new game and you have to measure with a different yardstick. Because yes, obviously, if you want to go make more money, the thing to do is to start a company. But when you don't need money, it can be hard to switch that off. Because for most of us, I'll speak for myself, right? The way that I have made effectively every career decision in my life has been what will pay me the most money. And there will come a day when that should no longer be my guiding star, right? And you knowing when that time is takes the help of a financial professional, probably a life coach, psychologist, career coach type. Yeah.
Well, I'm even thinking about, because I have a number of, we'll call it cases or people that are in this vein of, we're not talking, I mean, we're talking big numbers, but not the kind of numbers you were talking about of, hey, I'm 65, this is what I need to live on, and I have twice as much money that will last me the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I can't think of anything to do with it. So essentially, you're deciding that you're going to die with it, right? And it will just go off into whatever estate plan. But there's an opportunity there, and this is the thing I try to point out, is there's an opportunity there. How can you use this money as a tool while you're living, either for more experiences, because it's not just about spending money, that's sort of crass, but into creating memories, speaking into other people's lives. There's an opportunity cost to the world and your family if you operate from fear that, well, I might need it later. How is it just the same process of getting out of our heads?
So, in the book, one of the chapters talks about sort of fulfilling ways to spend money, and you just touched on a couple of them there. But, one of them that is consistently fulfilling and that people routinely get wrong is giving it away. Like when you ask people, hey, I'm going to give you $100, and then you'll be assigned into a group where you either have to give it away or spend it on yourself, and then you say, which will make you happier, right? 90+% of people say, well, I'll be happier if I get assigned to the spend it on myself group, right? And that is exactly wrong. It's better than 90% of the people are happier when they're assigned to the give it to others group. So giving that money away, we know from the science, is one of the purest, straightest lines to happiness. The other thing that we can do that might expose us to, to this greater creativity, one of the least effective ways you can spend money is in ways that lead to habituation. So habituation is just the human process of getting used to stuff. So if I go buy a new, Bentley, like if I go buy a new Bentley or whatever fancy new car I want, and I'm driving that around, it's really awesome for like 2 weeks. And then quickly that falls off and it just becomes my car, right? The things, something like a car or a house, even a really nice one, quickly becomes the backdrop against which we live our lives. But experiences that give us newness or novelty or break us out of sort of our sleepwalking stance, these bring us happiness and they tend to stay with us. So if I fly to Japan and have food I've never tried and hear language I've never heard and meet people I'll never meet again, like that gets better with time. That doesn't get habituated. That memory gets better with time. So using some of that money to break out of the habituation cycle, to go try new people, new food, new experiences, new sights, new vistas, like all of that has the immediate impact of giving you a boost of happiness. And then it probably has the secondary impact of maybe helping you discover this thing you're talking about that's like a creative act too.
The Soul of Wealth, I love the way that it's written. I think what I love about this book is that it takes Dr. Crosby, but also the man, Dan Crosby, and is much more meaningful. The Soul of Wealth, let me see if I can hold it the right direction. It's a great book, and we rarely have authors on just to talk about their books, but you are a friend, and you are a kind man, and I think this is something that's important. Thanks for sharing it, Dan.
No, I appreciate the help, sir. And you're doing wonderful, soulful things with money, and you're a voice for reason in the wilderness, and I'm appreciative that you'd have me on.
Yeah, we're excited to have you in the Rock Retirement Club here in the next few months.
Love it. Thanks.